Before we begin this video, I just want to say that by September, I will no longer be living here. 90% probability, though. But anyway, Media Matters gave us a hilarious and yet infuriating compilation of right-wing snowflakes, mostly Fox News, just doing everything they can to just demonize and smear the name of the Democratic Party. So take a look.
Why is it that in this early part of this century, socialism suddenly makes a reappearance? Why?
This is getting scary. If you pay attention, it will scare you.
Socialists becoming the mainstream of the left.
The Democratic Party is embracing socialist values.
They talk about things that everybody wants.
Let's see, single payer, universal health care, universal jobs.
They're saying, I want free Medicare. I want a guaranteed salary.
Government subsidized housing for everybody.
Fully funded public universities and schools.
Abolish ICE, and of course, impeach President Trump.
What happened in Venezuela? They call that democratic socialism.
The average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds because they're starving to death.
In Venezuela, human beings are taking dog medicine.
Their ultimate end is either North Korea or Venezuela.
Just look at Venezuela.
What country is this, Venezuela?
They're going to be the left of Venezuela.
Venezuela?
Venezuela. Venezuela. Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
She's talking more about Scandinavia than Venezuela.
Would socialism require that we give everything back?
Let's hang out at the coffee shop and talk about socialism.
I'm a democratic socialist. Shut up, will ya?
Maybe go easy on the socialism.
When you think of the atrocities that have been committed in the name of socialism, in the name of communism, it's just staggering.
Single-payer healthcare system is very frightening to me indeed.
The left of the Democratic Party is describing communism, not socialism. Communism.
Indeed.
All this talk about Russian influence going on. But if you really think about it, the real takeover of the Marxists, the socialists, the old Soviet Union is on the Democrat Party.
So if Democrats want to go out and say, let's have socialism,
When they really mean communism.
And actually claiming they are the new normal for your Democratic Party. Okay?
free college, you look at socialized medicine, single payer, you look at income, universal income.
And everything's free. You're going to get everything free. Lollipop's going to fall from the sky.
Why do you think people want socialism?
I'll explain it very easily. It's like the mob. You want something, you take it. Who pays for it? You pay for it. Or the other guy pays for it. What's the difference? We're going to take it, keep it, take it, give it to somebody who deserves it. That's what we're going to do.
If you are still a socialist after 25, you've got no head. You know who said that, I'm sure.
I think Churchill said that,
Yes,
didn't
sir. Yes, sir. Correct.
Are you fucking serious?
Every time someone says anything good about socialism or social democracy or anything Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Cortez, I'm not going to say her full name, that's what you do. The immediate straw argument is Venezuela. Anyone who knows anything about Venezuela knows that it's a shithole. As I have a coworker who actually fled Venezuela. The church I used to be at, I was a guy who grew up in Venezuela during that time. No one says that Venezuela is living in good conditions. No one thinks this. I've never heard Bernie Sanders say, we should be more like Venezuela, where people are starving, they have to go in line for a simple piece of toilet paper, and sometimes they don't even get that. What most people, when they think socialism or social democracy, or where countries that provide universal health care and free education and paid vacation of good, livable minimum wage, is Scandinavia, countries in Europe, Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, Finland, places like that can actually take care of its citizens. What we're asking for is basically not having our tax dollars go to military bases that we don't need, wars that we don't need, especially if they're unjustified, and also that the rich pay a little bit more in taxes because, one, they can afford it. Two, trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's been tried twice under 3 presidents, and it ruined the economy, and taxes on the rich worked. under Clinton. By January 2000, there was a $184 billion budget surplus. Billion, not million, billion. You know what we could have used that money for? Universal education, forgiving the debt of so many. I went on a date with a girl in February. She has recently told me that she had gotten a student loan of $2,000. Now that debt, because of interest, because banks are allowed to just charge at whatever interest you want, is now $18,000. She owes $18,000. If anyone deserves his or her student loan being forgiven, it's her. Because one, she's a mother. Two, thankfully not my kid. Two, paying $2,000, I'd get paying like $3, $4, maybe even $5,000, but $18,000 for originally a $2,000 loan, that is ridiculous. Some Western states the banks are allowed to charge you 500% interest.
The average interest rate they charge in Colorado is 129%. If an actual loan shark charged that much, you'd break his legs. And 129% is the low end. Yeah, tied for second highest are South Dakota and Wisconsin, where it's okay to charge 574%. The highest is Idaho, where it's not even a number, they just cut out your organs and sell them on eBay.
Why is it that when a bank charges you a shit ton of interest, it's just called interest? When a civilian does it at a reasonable rate, it's called loan sharking and a crime. Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro can suck a dick. He is just continuing the failed policies of Hugo Chavez, who is essentially a dictator. Hugo Chavez actually said that if the people weren't satisfied, he'd leave office in a year. Lo and behold, he did not. No one defends Venezuela. The Venezuelan people deserve better, but unfortunately, they don't. And the reason why we don't do it is because they have oil. It's just like how we tolerate Saudi Arabia, even though they treat their citizens, including their non-Christians and their women, horribly, and might, just saying, might. I just remember this one time this report came out that they might have had a hand in 9/11. I mean, 15 of 9/11 hijackers came from there. But the reason why we didn't invade Saudi Arabia? Oil. Oil. That's why. We just want to be able to take care of our people. Socialism is where the government controls things. I'm not for that. I'm for state capitalism, where I'm okay if the government was able to fund everything. You know, they can pay for everything. This mentality of survival of the fittest that Republicans have is just wrong. We can't just say, hey, you're on your own, survival of the fittest, every man for himself. We can't do that anymore. We have to look out for... I'm not saying that we should be a welfare nanny state, but I'm pretty sure... Look, I'm willing to not have things like free daycare since I don't have kids yet. I mean, it's the will of the Force if I do. And when I say will of the Force, I mean will of God. I'm a Star Wars fan. And paid vacations, I mean, I might see the merit in not having that. You know, if you want money, you gotta work for it. You know, general pensions. I mean, I'm willing to go through to not have that. But universal healthcare is a right, not a privilege. People have the right to adequate health care. 45,000 people die every year in this country because they don't have health care. I know so many people that don't have health care. You know what happens when you don't have health care in this promiscuous society? Unwanted babies. So many people can't have sex, or they do have sex but have kids because they don't have access to birth control because everything is so damn expensive. And remember Martin Shkreli, the farmer bro who, with that shit-eating grin, that who is going to hell, who jacked up the price of a life-saving anti-HIV drug from $13.15 a pill to $750, and who used market competition as an excuse. Well, if we had universal health care, that wouldn't be an issue. People would be able to get their HIV drugs because it's funded and paid for. Look, I'm anti-government when it comes to things like the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, warrantless spying, wiretapping, and all that shit. But people need to quit acting. Republicans need to quit acting like government is never the solution, like it can never do any good. It's only good for defending the borders and spying on you, and spying on your emails, and deporting your nanny. Look, but I'm not one of those guys who think that the government is the solution to everything. I'm a free market capitalist, yes. But I do think that I would be willing to pay a little bit more in taxes to be able to have free education and universal health care. And in fact, I would like the American people to be able to decide what their tax dollars go to. Like, if you're someone like me, the taxes I pay, I want that to go to be able to fund universal health care. Like, if you're in the military and you, for some ungodly reason, want your tax dollars to go to the military-industrial complex, that's your choice. You put military-industrial complex, endless wars, bombing civilians. No, I'm not hating on the military. I'm just saying that the current administration, Eisenhower was basically the only Republican that made sense. And Teddy Roosevelt. We've gone from Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly but carry a big stick, to speak loudly and be a big dick. Seriously, my tax dollars, I would choose for it to go to education and healthcare, even if it was only for myself, because I tend to spend money when I shouldn't. I spend it on dates, video games, women, not prostitutes. But what I'm saying is, money burns a hole in my pocket, and I have a problem with that. But what I'm saying is this: we're not socialists. We just simply believe that there are certain things that the government can solve, or the government should do, and there are certain things that free market should do. Socialism is like a majority that the government does, and communism is just 100%. But we are not communists. Bernie Sanders is not a communist. He may call himself a socialist, but he's not. He's a capitalist, but he's a social democrat. He believes in that the government should pay for some things. But this whole survival of the fittest, this for-profit healthcare system, it's not working. People are going in debt, or either they're going in debt or they're dying. The only people who can benefit from the healthcare system we got today are the wealthy, who can just go into the doctor, pay a few $1,000s, and be okay. People like me, I have to constantly worry about, like, if something happens to me, if I can afford it. I've got some cavities. We are still having to pay for it. If we had universal and free healthcare, this wouldn't be a problem. My teeth would have been fixed a long time ago. I haven't started addiction. I mean, is there a caffeine anonymous? My grandfather, I don't know if this would have happened, but if we had universal health care, my grandfather would probably still be here. Not sure, but I'm just saying there's a possibility. We're not socialists, and this constant smearing and this straw manning that we want to be like North Korea, Soviet Union. And another thing, I remember they say that that people, the government of Venezuela, they call themselves democratic socialists. That's like comparing the National Football League to National Socialism because it has the word national in it. I mean, Assassin's Creed Unity. It's kind of like saying that Hitler was a leftist, like Ben Shapiro says, because he called himself a National Socialist. It's a cover. It's the cover thing. He didn't call him. No one would go for him if he's like, yeah, my party shall be Kill the Jews Party. We're the Kill the Jews Party. Also, the official name of North Korea, they call themselves the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Are they democratic? No. Are they a People's Republic? No. They're basically the Korean communist version of Nazi Germany. A cult. And the mafia? I'm pretty sure the United States is run by the mafia. It's called the Trump administration. He runs it. There's allegations that he has mob connections. And it's also he basically runs it like a mafia. He gives it to people he likes, including his own family, who are total dipshits. And he fires and he threatens people who disagree with him. Look, America's not perfect, and government is not perfect. But it's better than just this policy, this Darwinist survival of the fittest. Look, the reason why some of these Republicans who claim to be Christian and yet don't give a shit about their fellow man, they're not really Christian. They were simply raised by Christians, and because most of the people are Christian, they call themselves that. Fuck. For Republicans who call themselves Christians and yet they don't care about their fellow human suffering, I think Bill Maher best describes it in this way.
There is not a tent in the world big enough to fit under it both Jesus and Ayn Rand. In order to be both Republican and Christian, they had to create an entirely new Jesus. We don't only have two Americas, we have two Jesuses now. It's true. Liberals have the traditional Jesus who hated rich assholes and wouldn't shut up about how they should give away all their money. And conservatives made up a completely new Jesus, a small businessman from Galilee. Whose main gripe is big government and who wants to make Nazareth great again. I call him supply side Jesus. He'd love to help the less fortunate, but he's got investors to think about. Like the time supply side Jesus performed a miracle and created a bounty of loaves and fishes, and then gave them all to the top 1% so they could trickle down to the takers. Or the time supply-side Jesus came upon a leper who asked to be healed. So supply-side Jesus bought the company that makes leprosy medication and jacked up the price. Jesus may have said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. But it was supply-side Jesus who said, did I ever tell you about the time I shot a camel?
Republicans who call themselves Christians make out Jesus to be this corporation-loving guy who loved rich people, who wanted like, hey, Rome, stop taxing the rich. Let them have their money. They'll give it to the poor. They do the right thing because humans aren't selfish by nature. It's like, oh, and you poor people, get a job. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you lazy bums. I'm pretty sure he was more loving than that. In fact, he told a rich guy to sell his stuff. For those of you who either believe in God or who are willing to humor me, because there are some people who, no matter what, they can't just go with it. Mark 10, he was asked about how do you inherit life, and he said all the 10 commandments and stuff. And teacher, the man replied, I've obeyed all these commandments since I was young. Looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. There's one thing you haven't done, he told him. Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. At this, the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God." This amazed them. But Jesus said again, "Dear children, it is very hard to enter the kingdom of heaven."
It is much harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle.
Jesus was not saying that if you're rich you can't get into heaven. He's not saying that. But some people don't see it that way. He's saying that camels are more humble, I guess. But what people, they see this whole rich people can't get into heaven, so they ignore that. Just like how Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor." But that's boring, or it's not the way they grew up, where back in the 20th century you judged everyone that wasn't like you, especially homosexuals or blacks or gays or atheists or people who disagreed with you, people who are left of center, you know. And Republicans, they simply smear everyone who isn't like them. Anyone who is left of the center is a communist, is a socialist that hates America, that loves Venezuela, loves North Korea, loves the Soviet Union, loves terrorists. They just smear. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't Democrats that do the same, but when I've watched MSNBC, I don't, on a regular, I don't watch Fox, I don't watch news shows. I get my news from friends and internet articles and people like Todd Kalinske and Farron Cousins. And I used to watch Rebel Media, but they've become partisan hacks. But I do check in from time and time again. But the point is, I've watched MSNBC before, and I never see them just saying, all Republicans are racist, all Republicans are fascists, they're all Nazis. Now, you see that with people who work for BuzzFeed or if you live in California, but not just your average Democrat like myself. I know not all Republicans are racist, homophobic, sexist, fascists. That's just the old ones, like Pat Robertson or John Hagee or Brian Fisher and Alex Jones, even though he's not that old. But Alex Jones is basically like the old ones. What I'm saying is this. Republicans are not all the same. Democrats are not all the same. And not even socialists are the same. I've met a socialist once, and she denounces Venezuela. I didn't really ask much about socialism because, well, socialism can go fuck itself. I'm for the government paying for things, not controlling. There's a difference between controlling something and paying for it. But I also believe in regulations. Hey, you can't be allowed to screw the people. You can't be allowed to screw your workers. You can't ask them to work so many hours and not compensate them. You can't just say, hey, you sign up for it. I'm all for fairness, not survival of the fittest.